This is Brian from ScreenFiles.com, and the movie we're reviewing today is Antoine Fuqua's The Magnificent Seven. Antoine Fuqua, the director of things such as Training Day, The Equalizer, and now The Magnificent Seven, is probably one of the foremost action directors in Hollywood today. And you can tell on the screen he's really good at what he does. There's lots of motion, there's a lot of action, but at the same time he makes an effort to humanize the characters, which is really important, especially in a property like The Magnificent Seven. I would start talking about things like it's based on Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and all that type of thing. But the thing is, I haven't seen The Seventh Samurai. And in fact, I barely remember The Magnificent Seven. I have seen it in the past. So I'm not going to pretentiously go into that because I haven't seen either of those. I haven't seen one of those movies in a long time, and I haven't seen the other one at all. So I'm not even going to spend effort on it. Though, what I can say is that Fuqua's Magnificent Seven is really well done. It's really attractive. Though, like any movie, it's not perfect. When I think of Westerns, I tend to think of things like John Ford's The Searchers and that type of thing. Namely, movies that emphasize the environment that they're taking place in. I should say Westerns that emphasize the environment that they're taking place in. And that's really important. It not only gives you a sense of place, but a sense of grandeur and drama, just from the landscape. And that's something that Fuqua doesn't really do in this movie, and that's a pity. There are shots of the landscape, but they're few and far between. Lots of people tend to clutter, or a town, for instance, will clutter it, and that's a pity. I would have liked to see more of the environment by itself, not necessarily, or with a few writers going through it, as opposed to just being as if he has to fill the environment with stuff. Wasn't crazy about that. Another thing that I would have changed is that there's so much shooting going on that it's sometimes hard to tell who's shooting who. Only thing is, there are more bad guys. I think literally 3 or 4 times the number of bad guys than good guys. So if someone's being shot, more than likely it's a bad guy. But there's just nothing really differentiating them after a point. So there's a whole sequence of movie where people are getting shot and I have no idea who they are. The only reason I assumed that it wasn't any of the Magnificent Seven being shot because they're the Magnificent Seven. The movie would let you know, and it does, it would let you know they were being shot or not. But all the chaos wasn't a good thing. It in some ways reminded me of, well, Star Wars, which is based upon Westerns, frankly, which is probably based on a Akira Kurosawa movie that I haven't seen. But the idea of all these anonymous people being shot and you don't know who they are, all you know is that they're not good. But you don't know who they are, and their purpose is seemingly to be shot. And that's the same thing that happens in a lot of this movie. It's understandable, even expected, but it's also mildly irritating too. And it, as I said, I kind of lost track. Another thing about this movie that I wasn't particularly crazy about was the soundtrack. James Horner, who's a renowned movie composer, he worked with someone else. I don't recall the person's name off the top of my head, but it was such an obnoxious soundtrack that almost filled every part of the movie. Towards the end, it kind of laid off. And that bothers me a little bit because oftentimes directors use music to fill space, to create mood that the movie isn't creating. So it was, again, the music, one more time, the music wasn't bad. It's just the fact that there was so much of it initially that it wasn't letting me get into the movie. It was distracting me. It was telling me to feel one thing and something's on the screen telling me to feel another, and it was a clash. Don't particularly like movies that do that. That's not to say that there couldn't been or shouldn't have been music. I'm simply saying there was too much of it. Way too much. It was just distracting. Some of the good things about the movie, the acting. Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Vincent D'Onofrio, Everyone, and there are others, but those are the bigger names that are easier for me to remember. And, and they work really well. And this is something I tend to note because it's important that this, and it applies in this case as well, this movie is funnier, far funnier than the commercials would lead you to believe. And a lot of the humor, oddly enough, comes from Vincent D'Onofrio's character, who's this kind of Grizzly Adams type trapper person. And it's good stuff. And again, it's not stupid humor. I can't stand stupid humor. It's more situational humor, and it works. Something that bothered me about this movie was that there'd be scenes where people are riding their horses across a prairie, and you see a vehicle, you don't see a vehicle, but there's a camera mounted on a vehicle and it's racing ahead of them. That sort of thing works fine in a movie, a modern movie. With a Western, the only thing that was popping in my head was there's a car with a camera speeding faster than those horses. It's a little thing. It happens maybe 3 or 4 times in the entire movie. And it's a little thing, but it's a distracting thing. Anytime I saw those horses just racing across the prairie, and it'd be this camera, again, you don't see the camera. Antoine Fuqua is a better director than that. You're not going to see boom mics, you aren't going to see cameras. But something is racing faster than those horses, and it's filming them from the side. It's a car, and it feels like a car, and it's weird. If it were, there must have been a way of filming that, not mounting the camera on a car and just driving really fast to keep up with the horses. It was just irritating, and it was an instance of technology intruding on the process. Very visible technology. Technology does it all the time with modern movies, but if they manage to merge it with what's going on, you don't really notice. In this instance, the technology was just glaringly obvious, and that bugged me. There were a few instances of CGI-enhanced explosions. Not terrible, but noticeable. I could have done without those. And I don't want to give the impression that the entire explosion was created via CGI. That's not the case at all. What would happen, though, is there'd be an explosion, and it boosted with CGI. And it kind of looked like an explosion boosted by CGI. You know, it is what it is. Though overall, The Magnificent Seven is also a little long. As I mentioned earlier, there are sequences where people are being shot, you have no idea who they are, and it's just happening. And some of that could have been cut. I don't know, good 15, 20 minutes throughout the movie could have been cut. Would have made it leaner, made it tauter, I think make it play a little bit better. But that being said, Magnificent Seven is, all in all, including shortcomings. That being said, the Magnificent Seven, all in all, is pretty damn good. Shortcuts be damn. That being said, the Magnificent Seven is pretty good. Shortcomings, they're there, relatively small. It's a typical Antoine Fuqua movie, by which I mean it looks good, it's competent, and more often than not, it features Denzel Washington. Not a bad trio at all. This is Brian from ScreenFiles.com.